Welcome to the review and ranking of every Saw movie. I'm going to review every Saw movie and then rank them on a tier list, so stick around for that. Something I want to say before we start is that I'm not going to be covering every single point when it comes to these movies. I'm only going to go into ones that I'm either interested in, passionate about, or feel like I have a weird take on. I'm not going to talk about every single problem, so don't expect every single problem to be there. These are just my thoughts and then my ranking of the movie. Anyway, review time. Saw is the first and best movie in the franchise by far. It's one of the few movies in the series that are actually good. Like, most of the movies are lovably awful, and only 2 or 3 of them get to be called good movies. Saw released in 2004, and it's basically the center point of the entire franchise. Nearly everything in this series ties itself to Saw 1, and it's genuinely frustrating how often you're going to see this one bathroom after this movie ends. When I first came to write the script, I didn't really have anything to say about Saw 1, other than talking about the finale, which I will get to, but coming back and re-going through the script and getting to the point of editing, I want to mention about how well this movie sets up this overarching villain that will come to be the face of the franchise, because even though he's literally not in the movie for almost the entire runtime, the idea that throughout the movie you see these 2 characters locked in a bathroom finding out who each other are, and every now and then you get little hints about who Jigsaw is one of the best ways of introducing a villain I think I've seen in a movie in a very long time. Now, this is a testament to how good the first Saw movie is, because every movie after this includes the main bad guy almost the whole time, other than a few that change who the bad guy is. But this movie started it, and it barely even had the main fucking character in it, and that is just insane. I also want to talk about the 2 victims in this movie, because I feel like out of all of them, other than Amanda, who we'll talk about in the next movie, Adam and Gordon are the most impactful victims in the entire franchise. And I don't mean this in terms of impactful on the narrative, I mean in terms of the audience. If you brought back Adam in Saw 11, I would shit my pants. The way this movie sets up its characters is probably the best the franchise gets, other than maybe in Saw X. But the idea of how intertwined Adam and Gordon's lives are is just so well done. It's honestly such a shame that none of the later movies really lived up to this hype. I think in general this movie is fine, but it is carried so hard by its finale. It's just insane. So for the majority of the movie, it keeps cutting back to this guy in a hood with a bunch of monitors, watching the game play out through the camera. Anyone with a brain immediately assumes this is Jigsaw. However, once this man comes into the bathroom to kill Gordon and gets his shit rocked by Adam, we find out that the hooded figure is just another victim in the hardest way possible.
Hello, Mr. Hindle. Or as they called you around the hospital, Zap.
This scene is so damn iconic because of the Saw theme. Hello Zep is one of the coolest themes in horror, and this is where it comes from. And if that was just it, I wouldn't be raving about it. So far, it's a cool but average twist. The real question is, if Zep isn't Jigsaw, who is? And that's when the corpse that has been in the middle of the bathroom for the whole damn movie stands up. This is just insane. I love it so much. This scene alone explains exactly how fucked up Jigsaw is. To avoid suspicion for the whole movie, he just pretends to be one of his own victims who failed to survive his game. And although it doesn't mean anything, really, it's still just such a fun twist, and I was genuinely gobsmacked when I first saw it. It didn't help that I was an idiot thinking Zep looked like a young Tobin Bell the whole time, and throughout the movie I just thought he was Kramer and that Tobin Bell had just aged really poorly since 2004, but that wasn't the case, and it was such a good payoff. Now, I think ordinarily I would have given this movie a significantly lower rating, but this ending alone gives it at least a 7 out of 10 from me. Unlike the first movie, Saw 2 does its best to be really good and then ruin it all in the final act. If you ever saw the Escape Room movie, this movie basically invented the entire idea for that movie. In a nutshell, 5 people wake up in a house and they have to work together to escape. Similar to the first movie, they're all in there for some sin they have committed in the past. One thing this movie does, which I love, and I wish more Saw movies did this, is include a child. While Kramer obviously doesn't have many issues with a child because they probably haven't had enough time to park in his spot or color outside the lines just yet, it's easy to empathize with Daniel because of his age. And you also build so much respect for Amanda in this film because of her relationship with Daniel. Like Saw 1, there is one scene in particular in this movie that it is remembered for, and it's obviously the needle pit. Oh my god, when I first saw this, I don't think I've ever cringed and tensed up that much watching a movie. ever. It's got one of the rare good acting moments in Saw as well. Shawnee Smith really sells a scene, and it genuinely is disgusting to watch. But as I mentioned earlier, the finale really corrupts this movie for me. There's something about finding out that Amanda has been in on it the whole time. While it shows how nuts she is, knowing that the most engaging character in the film was faking it the whole time means the only victim I gave a shit about was Daniel. And no offense to him, he's one of the best actors in the movie and he can't act to save his life. I also think this movie commits the cardinal sin of Saw movies, and that it includes too much cop stuff. While seeing Eric react to his son in the trap is quite cool, Kramer just waffles for like half the movie and it becomes so boring when the only thing I care about is the part I'm not watching. At the end of the day, 50% of this movie is really entertaining, and then the ending ruins part of that 50%. So I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10. Okay, Saw 3 is where they all start to blend together. Like, you have Saw 1, 2, 3D Spiral, and X, where I can actively know what movie you were talking about by saying its name. But 3 to 6 and Jigsaw are nearly all the same in my mind. And if you say, oh, but Jigsaw's is in the barn, shut up. That doesn't help. Anyway, Saw 3 is a nice change of formula. However, I hate it when the movies don't focus on the traps. Like I said last time, like, the cop stuff or the civilian stuff is really boring for me. And granted, they do try and make it more interesting in this one, but nonetheless, I'm watching the movie for the traps. Unless you're one of the rare few good Saw movies, your narrative isn't good enough for me to care, so just keep showing me people being hurt in really disgusting ways and I'll be happy. Saw 3 is also the time when the plots of these movies get super confusing, because nearly every movie from now will call back to this movie. And it's not like Saw 1 where they're referencing, there is something pivotal that happens in the background of this movie that you missed the first time because the camera wasn't looking slightly more to the right or slightly more to the left or behind a wall. But anyway, the movie starts showcasing some jigsaw traps that Amanda has set up. They're all unfair and impossible, which goes directly against Kramer's idea of rebirth. This sets up the idea that Kramer is looking for a replacement after he inevitably passes due to his brain cancer. A fate so inevitable, he abducts a doctor and forces her to stall the cancer as best she can so he can live to the end of this game. A game of which a man named Jeff is going through a bunch of tests, which he is comically bad at. The tests were supposed to teach Jeff to get over his son's death and forgive instead of being vengeful, but he ends up just letting everyone die anyway. And that's like my biggest crux with this movie, is because it's trying to be the movie where the victim failed, right? And in doing so, it's really interesting and it's really cool to see the victim fail, except this movie entirely focuses on the non-trap stuff. It's like they thought this would be a really cool idea if Jeff just fucking lost, and then they don't show Jeff losing for almost the whole movie. And I get the point of the plot is that he ties into Lynn, the doctor, but if the gimmick is Jeff losing, I would like that to be more of a focus on the movie, because Jeff losing really just didn't affect me when I watched this. I was more in shock about Amanda being jealous and shooting Lynn than I was about anything Jeff had to do in the whole movie. But like, when you really look at it, the Jeff losing seems like it was what the movie was supposed to be about, or at least this was supposed to be the movie where the victim lost, and that was supposed to be the main big thing about it. So I'm really not quite sure how I feel about this one. But, like, again, the character work done with Lynn made her death slightly meaningful, which I appreciated in a Saw movie. And, you know, it's a battle of, do I appreciate what is good about it, or do I pinpoint what the movie failed to do? And that's a very, like, hard balance with this movie. But I think I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10, because this movie is good. It's just not the same level as Saw 1. So, I'm not gonna lie, while I was writing this, I completely forgot everything that happened in Saw 4. It's just a really, really forgettable movie. And all I could remember was the really shitty, like, transitions that are littered throughout the movie. And I also remember despising it, and while watching it, feeling it was one of the only movies so far that didn't fit the lovably awful category, and sort of is just awfully awful. And so when I was trying to write this segment, I decided to go look at my original review that I posted to Letterboxd minutes after watching it, and to pick out, like, the interesting parts about it. It basically says that even with the Spider-Man fan cam transitions and the constant flashing, this movie is such a sleeper ride. Riggs is a great character and I like the idea of him being forced to let people die, but it's literally the least entertaining part. Riggs having no risk or reward in his decisions was so damn boring, which, looking back, I think is a nearly fair analysis. The only clarification I'd want to make now is that it's not the fact that Riggs is choosing if other people live or die, it's the fact that he doesn't face the moral fight near the same level that Jeff faced in the last movie. Both movies have their testes go... testes... Both movies have their victims go through a series of traps where they get to choose if the victims live or die, but after Riggs saves the first girl, she is told to kill him anyway, so now he is incentivized to let people die for his own survival. Not out of moral fiber or a sacrifice he has to make for a positive outcome, it's purely selfish, and this makes Riggs a worse person coming out of the test, which I'm personally not a fan of. I also think the traps in this movie just kinda suck. I think the Ice Cube trap might be the most visually boring trap in the series, and the movie as a whole is very close to being the worst Saw movie in my opinion, so it gets a whole 2 out of 10. I swear everyone on Twitter hates this one, and I just don't get it. I liked it a lot. The idea that the victims have to think outside the box and save everyone is super fresh. I will say that some of the characters are a little annoying or just completely stupid. Like, one of the traps has the character smash glass jars to get a key so that they can get into little tunnels for safety. But the thing that's threatening their lives are different glass jars, so why don't you just break those ones? And instead, they use it to beat the shit out of each other, which I guess is the point of the movie. But the movie doesn't even think on this level. The movie says that the correct solution is that multiple people should have gotten in the tunnels. Why can't they just break the fucking nail bombs? This movie also does something I really liked and brought back ideas from Saw 1 and 2, which, unlike most franchises where they're just trying to remind you of older movies in a franchise that everyone liked, this one actually manages to do it well, so gotta give it props there. I'm sort of running out of things to say already about this movie. It didn't really have that big of an impact on me, other than just being an enjoyable Saw movie. Although I will say is that I really like this format of where it's sort of like the group of victims work together to go through like little levels almost, as if it's like a fucking video game. And this sort of style comes back in Jigsaw, and I think it's my favorite overall format for these movies in terms of how the traps work. I feel bad for not really having much to say, but from Saw 4 onwards, it was very much just another Saw movie was coming out, and like you have good movies in this like group of just another Saw movies, but there's really not much else to say because they're all just picking and choosing little ideas from previous movies and then turning them inside out. So other than the change of format, there's really nothing new here, and there's just not much to talk about. It's very much a mid or mediocre movie that just happens to have a format that I really like, so for that I'm gonna give it just above mid, which is a 6 out of 10. Speaking of good movies in this bunch, Saw 6 suddenly going political is so funny to me. But honestly, it works. Especially for the sake of getting rid of the Jigsaw indirectly kills murderers gimmick that was sort of going on. I really like the detective side of this movie, which is rare to see. But as a huge detective story fan, scenes like when Hoffman is told about the different blades or the voice decoding are done surprisingly well and with a decent amount of tension for a narrative scene within a Saw movie. Anyway, getting into the traps of this movie, again, I really like the route this movie takes. Being a little real, but also clearly personal for Kramer does wonders for his post-mortem character development, and also for the engagement this movie holds. This is expedited by Roderick and his mum seemingly having a kill switch in their cage, which again, is something really interesting for Saw. It's a good switch up to feature the people harmed by the Jigsaw victims' wrongdoings, because before, like, we know that they're bad people, but we've never really seen what they've done. This is a really nice light to shine, and it's something that they haven't done before. Another thing which I actually really enjoy is, unlike Jeff in the third movie, it's nice to see William is good at the task, and it's also really nice to see some really fucking powerful traps. Like, Kramer forces Will to choose to hang someone with a barbed wire, which is so raw. Although after the scene we get the best line of dialogue the franchise has to offer.
Made by the fucking insurance companies. Piranha.
God, John Kramer is so damn cute in this movie. We then have two of the best traps in the series, the steam trap and the shotgun roulette trap, which are both so well done. Then it goes on to something which I will talk about hating in the next movie, but Hoffman goes on a killing spree because the cops actually figure out he's Jigsaw, which goes so hard. Him being in the room made the scene tense and satisfying, which is weird because usually the cop stuff sucks in these movies. Then this movie has a really cool ending where Roderick kills William and Jill locks the reverse bear trap onto Hoffman, which he survives, and then you get a really cool, like, classic Saw montage of everything, and then this really goofy little door montage, which I put at the start of this video because I think it's really cool. This is easily a 7 out of 10 movie, one of the best, although Saw 1 had less Hoffman, which makes it better in my opinion. Before we even talk about Saw 3D, I need to say, yes, the blood is pink, and it's weird and ugly. Speaking of ugly, this movie's budget must have gone completely into 3Ding everything, because fucking hell, the effects just do not hold up to any of the other movies in the franchise. The opening trap is almost a good one. The new setting is really cool even though it means nothing. The relationship between the characters is entertaining, but all of that doesn't matter when the gore looks like complete arse. So then anyway, Gordon survived, which looking back was kind of teased in Saw 5, although no one's going to think that the random streak of blood in the horror villain's dungeon is supposed to mean anything. We then introduced Officer Gibson, who by far, I know this might sound crazy seeing as we have a certain Chris Rock-led movie coming up.
No, fuck you!
But I think this Gibson guy might showcase the worst acting in this series by far. He is unbearably bad in this movie. Then we're introduced to the main victim of the movie, Bobby, a man who's trying to profit off of pretending to be a Jigsaw villain. This guy is both the worst in-universe and in the movie. Holy shit, I hate this guy too. Like, really, at the end of the day, this movie just has a few too many shit characters. It really drags the whole movie down. The earlier movies in the franchise could get away with shittier characters because they were underdeveloped, but this movie tries to make me care so much, and I just do not and will not. I will say the only thing currently putting this movie above Saw 4 for me is the silent circle trap. That was really cool. The whole movie has this dumb timer thing going off too, which basically is only there to add artificial tension because the movie wasn't actually tense before they put the timer in, which movies and TV do all the time, and it's a fair technique. But this movie has the audacity to put timers within timers, and that is where I draw the line. Gibson gets taken out of the movie by a machine gun turret, which I really don't like. It's just a case of Hoffman being a really shit Jigsaw. And, like, going into that, Hoffman's about to murder a load of people as if he's Michael Myers. Like, look, that's just not what Jigsaw is about. Anyway, Bob gets dragged to the end of the movie and asked to go through the trap that he bragged about surviving in his book, which naturally doesn't go his way because he's an idiot. So this completely innocent wife gets locked inside a fucking furnace and is melted to death, which is so over the top, and I actually kind of like this, but like not in a good way. And then we finally, after, 7 movies, get to properly see the reverse bear trap go off, which is really cool. And then the movie decides to retcon the whole series and basically make Gordon responsible for all the random events in the entire franchise before we end up back in the Saw 1 bathroom where we get a saw thrown at us and the film ends. 2 out of 10, this shit sucks. Look, I'm gonna be honest, I like this one. It's not amazing, but I do like it a lot. This was actually the first Saw movie I ever watched, and maybe that plays a part into my feelings, but this one just has some of the best victims and interesting traps in the series, and a genuinely decent mystery element. I really like the traps in this one. They're all memorable, and while I said this movie blends in with the others beforehand, I still remember the traps, I just forget they're in this movie. Honestly, the only trap I'm not a fan of is the main centerpiece of the movie, the cycle trap. It's just ugly, and like compared to the rest of the movie, it really doesn't suit the vibe, but the rest are great. And as I said earlier, this is my favorite format of Saw movie. I think that the characters in this one outclass the characters in 5. Bringing back the Saw 2 vibes of the characters figuring out why they are there is really fun. And it makes the chain hangers trap a memorable moment when Carly figures out the solution to the trap and still refuses to choose. The other thing this movie does really well is it makes the civilians interesting throughout, focusing on making the new Jigsaw feel like he's always one step ahead, which is something we haven't seen in a while, and Logan being there the whole time makes this even cooler. I think that the biggest problem people have with Jigsaw is the twist ending, that Logan is actually the first Jigsaw protege, and look, if you care, I'm really happy for you, but it's Saw and really not that deep, and in my opinion, Logan clears Amanda, Hoffman, and Gordon anyway, so it's not that big of a loss. And it's also a really cool twist that we actually experience 2 different games during this movie. We haven't seen that before. And not only are we seeing 2 games, we're seeing 2 games that mimic each other. And while one is modern and one is older, It showcases how timeless the Jigsaw trap is, and I really like the comparison between the two final tests in each trap. I think it's just a really cool dynamic and something we hadn't seen in the franchise yet. Yeah, I don't know. I really enjoy this one. I think it's definitely more of a guilty pleasure than it is a genuine like. Because this movie definitely has a lot of flaws, but it's miles better than some of the shit this franchise puts out. And maybe it's just after watching all the shit, I just happen to like this one a lot. Or if I'm genuinely going insane. But I do, even just thinking about it now, this is easily one of the Saw movies that I would happily rewatch before a lot of the others, you know? So for now, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10 because I can understand that it isn't a very good movie, but I do also really like it. So this might go higher in a few months. Spiral is like Jigsaw. If the good traps were flashbacks and everything else about it was complete dogshit. This movie is really not good. The only good things about Spiral are genuinely the last scene, the finger trap, and the new Jigsaw. The rest is a complete waste of time. The casting in this movie is horrifically bad. I'm convinced Samuel Jackson is just here to get another franchise under his belt because he just plays Sam L. Jackson in this movie, and he's not even playing Sam Jackson that well. I also can't talk about bad acting in this movie without mentioning Chris Rock. He just really shouldn't be in live action movies because he talks like it's an animation that he's voice acting for.
No backup, cause there's nobody on the force I can fucking trust!
Every line he delivers is either really bad or really funny, and there's absolutely no in between. The worst part about that is that he's the main character. I think the biggest flaw in this movie, other than Chris Rock, is the idea that they decided to take what most Saw movies use as the C-plot, the dumb cop doctor civilian storyline, and made it the entire A-plot. And then decided to put all the iconic Saw traps in brief montage flashbacks where you don't even get to see the outcome half the time, you just get to see the corpse at the end. I have to say, the funniest part about this movie is that it just simply ends, like, out of nowhere. I know most Saw movies don't do the 20-minute happily ever after sequence that most movies do, but literally in the middle of the most interesting part of the movie, it just cuts to black and the credits start rolling. I understand that Spiral isn't trying to be a typical Saw movie, but that doesn't mean it has to be a different shit Saw movie. It really struggles to do anything well, and honestly, the only thing I can think of right now is that the new Jigsaw's voice is pretty cool, and the traps in concept are cool. Shame I don't get to see them half the time. And if you've listened to this whole video, you know I'd hate this movie, because you know how I feel about the dumb side plot with cops or whatever. It's just mind-numbing. It's so boring compared to what the actual main plot of the movie is that it struggles to engage me whatsoever, and for some reason every time they get the worst actors to play these characters. I think Spiral is genuinely one of the best watches you can have when it comes to this franchise. As long as you're with friends, you will spend the whole time laughing at it, and that is something that none of the other movies can do. It is so bad that it can genuinely be a good time, and I can only give it a 1 out of 10. We are so back with this movie. Okay, I don't exactly know how they pitched this movie, but I'm sure it went something like this. What if we made another Saw movie, but get this, we give it an actual half-decent story, and then everybody cheered and they celebrated for hours on end, because while I have sung praises about Jigsaw's and a few of the other Saw's plots, nothing comes close to this movie. It actually doesn't suck. The only other movies in this franchise I genuinely think don't suck are Saw 1 and 6. This movie is very disconnected, but very impactful to the Saw franchise, and I love that. It allows itself to carry all the drama and tension, and doesn't worry about the effect it has on any of the other Saw movies, which allows it to be really entertaining. Following the Jigsaw killer is always something I've never been sure of, but in this movie it works because we get to see how badly these people treat a dying old man, and then we watch them rightfully suffer the consequences of fucking with John Kramer. When doing press, Tobin Bell talks about bringing humanity to John Kramer, and he does that very well, and it's good enough that even though when every other Saw movie has done this, I have not really liked it, I did really like it in this one. My genuine only complaint is that Amanda is back again. I honestly really wish we got to see Logan in one of the pig masks at least, because I just fucking really like Jigsaw, okay? And I want him back. The traps are comically over the top in this movie, which is super fun, and Kramer is inhumanly outwitting as well, which sort of fits into this character at this point, so I don't really mind. I love Kramer's relationship with Carlos. It's very sweet, and I think that looking back, this does set up the weird care for all of his like allies and apprentices he has. But again, I'm just sort of conflicted on him being a good guy. It feels a little like the Venom movies where I don't know if I want to be rooting for this guy. But anyway, this is definitely one of the best movies in the series in terms of how well it's made. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. As I said, I think it's better made than every other movie in the franchise, but nothing is going to top the feeling of Saw 1. So that's it. Stacking up all the movies next to each other and putting them on a tier list, this is what it's going to look like. From worst to best, we have Spiral, Saw 4, Saw 3D, Saw 2, Jigsaw, Saw 3, Saw 5, Saw 6, Saw 10, and Saw. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.